The hidden human phantom fleet reveals itself to rescue the Galaxy Admiral. Kethara stood on the bridge of her flagship, watching the holographic display with growing dread. Red dots blinked across the star map like a disease spreading through the galaxy. Each dot represented a world that had gone silent in the past month. Each one meant millions of lives lost or worse. Another system has stopped responding, reported Lieutenant Vexdal, his blue scales rippling with anxiety. The Kepler colony in Sector 7, population 12 million. The Admiral's forearms tensed as she gripped the command rail. Her people, the Valorians, had fought in countless wars across their 1,000-year history. But this enemy was different. This enemy was unstoppable. The Zephyrian Dominion had appeared at the galaxy's edge 2 years ago. At first, the Galactic Coalition had dismissed them as another aggressive species seeking territory. The galaxy had seen many such conflicts before. But the Dominion was not like other enemies. They were machines. Not simple robots or artificial intelligence, but something far more terrifying. The Dominion could take any living being and transform them into cybernetic drones. Worse, they learned from every battle, adapted to every strategy, and grew stronger with each world they consumed. "Status report from the Outer Rim?" Kethara asked. "Not good, Admiral," came the reply from Communications Officer Talshin. The Helix Defense Force was wiped out completely. The survivors report that Dominion ships can change their weapons in real time. What worked against them yesterday is useless today. Kethara moved to the main tactical display. The galaxy spread before her in 3 dimensions, showing the positions of coalition fleets, civilian populations, and the ever-expanding red zones where the Dominion held control. 3 spiral arms of the galaxy were already lost. Billions of beings had vanished into the Dominion's processing centers. The lucky ones died quickly. The unlucky ones became part of the enemy force, their minds trapped in metal bodies, forced to attack their own kind. "Where is Admiral Vorthak's battle group?" she asked. "Lost contact 6 hours ago," Talshin reported quietly. Last transmission showed them engaging a Dominion swarm near the asteroid fields of Keth. Then, nothing. The bridge fell silent. Admiral Vorthak commanded 300 ships and 50,000 of the Coalition's best warriors. If his entire fleet had been destroyed, the situation was even worse than they thought. Dr. Celix, the Coalition's chief scientist, approached, with a datapad in her tentacled hands. Her species, the Malari, were known throughout the galaxy for their brilliant minds, but even she looked defeated. "Admiral, I've been studying the Dominion technology," she said. "They don't just adapt to our weapons, they rewrite reality around them. Their ships exist in multiple dimensions at once. Our sensors can barely track them." "What are you saying, Doctor?" "I'm saying we're fighting an enemy that operates by rules we don't understand. Every time we think we've found a weakness, they evolve past it. At this rate, they'll reach the core worlds in 6 months. The core worlds. The heart of galactic civilization. Home to trillions of beings from hundreds of species. If the Dominion reached there, it would be the end of organic life in the galaxy." A communication alert chimed. The face of Chancellor Moradin appeared on the main screen. The ancient crystalline leader looked tired, his usually bright crystal form dim with worry. "Admiral Kethara," he said in his resonating voice. "The Galactic Council has reached a decision. All Outer Rim territories are to be abandoned. We're pulling back to establish a defensive line around the core worlds." "Chancellor, that means abandoning billions of people," Kethara protested. "I know, but we cannot save them if we're all dead. The architects are already retreating to their home dimension. The Luminians have begun their great withdrawal. Even the oldest races in the galaxy are running, Admiral. What chance do we have?" Kethara felt her heart sink. The architects had helped build the first starships. The Luminians were pure energy beings who had existed since the galaxy was young. If even they were retreating, what hope was left? "What about the research into ancient weapons?" she asked. "The archaeological teams searching the old ruins?" Dr. Salix stepped forward. "We've found fragments of technology from extinct civilizations, but nothing that could match the Dominion's power. Most of the ancient races fell to similar enemies long ago." The communication ended, and the bridge crew continued their work in heavy silence. Reports continued to flow in. Another colony ship full of refugees had been captured. A research station had gone dark. A mining world had sent out a distress signal. Then nothing. Kethara walked to the observation deck and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there in the darkness between worlds, The Dominion ships were spreading like a plague. She could almost feel their presence, cold and mechanical, consuming everything in their path. "Admiral?" Lieutenant Vexdal had followed her. "The crew is asking, is there any hope left?" She turned to look at him. Vexdal was young for a Valorian, only 200 years old. He had never seen a war they couldn't win. None of them had. "There's always hope," she said, though the words felt empty. "We'll find a way. We have to." But as she said it, another red dot appeared on the tactical display. Another world lost. Another few million lives added to the Dominion's growing army. Far, across the galaxy, in a secret facility buried deep in an asteroid field, Dr. Veltar studied ancient texts that most scholars dismissed as mythology. The old Valorian was one of the few xenoarchaeologists still searching the ruins of dead civilizations, looking for anything that might help. The current text spoke of the phantom fleet of the Forgotten Ones. According to the legend, when the galaxy faced its darkest hour, sleeping guardians would awaken to defend organic life. The text was thousands of years old, written by a race that had vanished before most current species had even evolved. "Sleeping fleet of the Forgotten Ones," Veltar muttered to himself. "Rise when the galaxy bleeds." Most of his colleagues thought he was wasting time with fairy tales. But Veltar had found similar stories in the ruins of 17 different civilizations. Different languages, different time periods, but always the same basic tale. Guardians who would return when needed most. He made a note in his research log and continued reading. The text mentioned a species called humans, beings who had supposedly vanished from the galaxy long ago. Most historical records suggested they were either extinct or mythical. But what if they weren't? Back on her flagship, Admiral Cathara received the latest casualty reports. 3 more systems had fallen in the past hour. The refugee ships streaming toward the core worlds carried stories of entire planets stripped bare, their populations processed into raw materials or cybernetic slaves. She closed her eyes and tried to remember what hope felt like. Somewhere in the vast darkness of space, the Dominion continued its advance. And somewhere else, perhaps in the space between galaxies, ancient guardians slept in ships that existed beyond normal reality. Neither force had yet revealed its full power to the galaxy, but soon, very soon, that would change. The Hidden Human Phantom Fleet. Part 2. The report started small, a Dominion scouting party that simply vanished between star systems. 3 ships that had been tracking a refugee convoy one day, gone the next. At first, Coalition intelligence dismissed them as equipment failures or navigation errors. Commander Zareth of Coalition Intelligence studied the data streams flowing across his multiple screens. His species, the Krillians, had compound eyes that could process dozens of information sources at once. What he was seeing made no sense. "Show me the Vega Sector incidents again," he told his assistant. The holographic display shifted to show a 3-dimensional map of space. Red markers indicated where Dominion forces had last been detected. Yellow markers showed where they should have arrived next, based on their travel patterns. 17 Dominion patrol groups entered this region, the assistant explained. None of them reached their destinations. No debris fields, no distress signals, they just stopped existing. Zareth's many eyes focused on the empty space between the markers. The Dominion ships had been following predictable routes, harvesting small outposts and research stations. Then they had encountered something that made them disappear completely. What? About survivor reports? That's the strange part, sir. The few Dominion drones we've captured keep repeating the same phrase. Ghost ships in the void. Metal that bends reality. They come from nothing and return to nothing. Across the galaxy, similar reports were filtering in. Dominion supply convoys, found drifting empty in space, their cargo holds stripped clean but no signs of battle damage. Forward scout groups that reported strange energy signatures moments before going silent. Entire Dominion processing facilities that went dark overnight. Dr. Veltar had been called to the Coalition capital to present his research. The ancient scholar stood before a council of the galaxy's most powerful leaders, feeling very small and very old. "Esteemed council members," he began, his voice shaking slightly. "For the past 50 years, I have studied the ruins of extinct civilizations. I have found a pattern that spans millennia." Chancellor Morden leaned forward, his crystal form reflecting the light from the chamber's walls. "Doctor, we are facing the extinction of all organic life. Please be direct." "Yes, Chancellor. In the archives of 17 different dead species, I have found references to something called the Phantom Fleet. According to these texts, when the galaxy faces its darkest hour, ancient guardians will return to protect organic life. A ripple of skeptical murmurs ran through the council chamber. Admiral Cathara, who had traveled here from the front lines, raised one of her 4 hands. Doctor, with respect, we need weapons and strategies, not fairy tales. But Admiral, what if they're not fairy tales? Veltar activated his holographic projector. Ancient symbols appeared in the air above the council table. Every one of these civilizations mentions the same species as these guardians. They call them humans. The council fell silent. Most species in the galaxy had heard whispered stories of humans. Some said they were mythical. Others claimed they had existed but vanished thousands of years ago. A few insisted they had never existed at all. The texts describe humans as a young species with an unusual ability to adapt and survive. Veltar continued. According to the records, they disappeared from the galaxy roughly 3,000 years ago, but they didn't die out. They left. Left for where? Asked Admiral Cathara. The space between galaxies. The void. According to these ancient accounts, they built a fleet and went into hiding, waiting for the right moment to return. Defense Minister Qualric spoke up, his mechanical voice cutting through the chamber. Even if humans existed, even if they built some kind of fleet, they would be using 3,000-year-old technology. How could they possibly fight the Dominion? That's just it, Veltar said excitedly. The texts suggest they didn't just hide. They learned. They gathered the knowledge of every civilization the galaxy had lost. Every species that fell to enemies like the Dominion contributed their technology to the human fleet. The council members exchanged glances. It sounded impossible. But then, so had the idea that the Dominion could conquer the galaxy in 2 years. Far from the coalition capital, in the deep void between galaxies, something ancient stirred. The massive ships had drifted in perfect formation for 3 millennia, their crews in deep cryogenic sleep. But now, automated systems were detecting the crisis unfolding in their former home. Admiral Sarah Chen awoke to the soft hum of revival systems. Her body felt stiff from the long sleep, but her mind was sharp. Around her, 10,000 other crew members were beginning their wake-up cycle. Status report, she said to the ship's AI. Admiral, the Dominion threat has manifested as predicted. Galactic organic life is at critical risk. All fleet elements are operational and awaiting orders. Sarah floated to the observation deck and looked out at the fleet she commanded. Thousands of ships stretched as far as she could see, each one a masterpiece of combined galactic technology. The hulls were made from materials that existed in multiple dimensions. The weapons could manipulate space and time itself. How long until full fleet activation? 72 hours, Admiral. All crew members will be awakened and combat systems will be fully online. Sarah nodded. For 3,000 years, humanity had prepared for this moment. They had studied every enemy the galaxy had ever faced. They had perfected technologies that seemed impossible. They had become something more than what they once were, while still remaining fundamentally human. Begin Phase 1 operations, she ordered. Small strike teams only. We observe the enemy's current capabilities before revealing our full strength. Back in Dominion space, the disappearances were becoming impossible to ignore. Entire battle groups were vanishing overnight. Supply lines that had been secure for months were suddenly cut. Processing facilities that should have been impregnable were found empty. Their organic prisoners simply gone. The Dominion Central Collective analyzed the pattern of losses. Its vast mechanical intelligence processed billions of data points, searching for the source of these attacks. But the enemy seemed to exist outside normal spacetime, appearing and disappearing without following known laws of physics. In the coalition territories, hope was beginning to stir for the first time in months. The Dominion advance had slowed, then stopped. Reports spoke of entire Dominion fleets retreating from positions they had held for weeks. Admiral Cathara stood on her bridge, studying the tactical display. The red zones representing Dominion control had stopped expanding. In some areas, they were actually shrinking. What's our assessment of the situation? She asked her tactical officer. Unknown, Admiral. The Dominion forces are confused. They're pulling back to defensive positions, but we can't determine why. Dr. Celix approached with her latest sensor readings. Admiral, I'm detecting energy signatures that don't match any known technology. The readings suggest ships that exist partially outside our dimension. Could it be some kind of coalition secret weapon? No, Admiral. This technology is beyond anything we've developed. It's as if someone has been advancing science for thousands of years while the rest of us stood still. On the edges of known space, refugee ships reported strange sightings. Massive vessels that appeared for moments before vanishing again. Ships that moved through space in ways that defied understanding. And sometimes very faintly, radio signals in ancient human languages that most universal translators could barely recognize. Dr. Veltar had returned to his research facility, but now, he worked with new urgency. The Council had given him unlimited resources to investigate the Phantom Fleet legends. Deep in the archives of the extinct Muad'Din civilization, he found a detailed account written just before their world was consumed by an enemy very similar to the Dominion. The sleeping fleet stirs, the text read. The guardians of the Forgotten Ones prepare to return. When the galaxy bleeds and hope dies, they will emerge from the space between stars. They will bring with them the accumulated wisdom of all who have fallen, and the determination of those who refuse to accept defeat. Veltar's hands shook as he translated the final passage. They call themselves human, but they have become something greater. They are the memory of every lost world, the vengeance of every extinct species, and the hope of every child yet to be born. As he finished reading, alarms began sounding throughout the facility. Emergency broadcasts flooded the communication channels. The Dominion had launched a massive offensive, throwing everything they had at the Coalition's defensive lines. The final battle was about to begin, and somewhere in the darkness between galaxies, the Phantom Fleet received the signal they had been waiting 3,000 years to hear. It was time to come home. The Hidden Human Phantom Fleet, Part 3. The Battle of the Nexus Gate began at dawn, Galactic Standard Time. Admiral Kithara watched from her flagship as the largest coalition fleet in history formed defensive lines around the massive space station that guarded the entrance to the core worlds. Final count, Admiral, reported Lieutenant Vexdal. 8,000 coalition ships from 47 different species. Every major military force in the galaxy is here. Kithara nodded grimly. It sounded impressive, but intelligence reports suggested the Dominion was bringing 3 times that number. Worse, their ships were getting stronger, while coalition technology remained static. The Nexus Gate itself was a wonder of ancient engineering. Built by unknown hands millions of years ago, it was the only stable passage through the violent energy storms that surrounded the core worlds. Control the gate and you control access to the heart of galactic civilization. Dominion fleet detected at the system edge, called out the sensor operator. Estimated arrival in 4 hours. Across the coalition fleet, ships prepared for what everyone knew would be the final battle. If they lost here, there would be nowhere left to retreat. The core worlds held the last major populations of organic life in the galaxy. Dr. Veltar had been granted passage to the battle aboard Admiral Kethara's flagship. The old scholar stood in the observation deck, clutching his ancient texts and mumbling prayers in languages that hadn't been spoken for millennia. Doctor, you should be in the protected sections of the ship, Admiral Kethara told him. No, Admiral. If my research is correct, this is where I need to be. The techs all agree. The Phantom Fleet will reveal itself during the darkest moment when all hope seems lost. Kethara looked at the old Valorian with a mix of pity and respect. She had read his reports, but putting faith in ancient legends seemed like desperation rather than strategy. The Dominion fleet appeared on long-range sensors as a cloud of red dots that seemed to fill space itself. Coalition commanders across the fleet reported the same readings. Over 25,000 enemy vessels with more arriving every minute. They're not even trying to hide their numbers, observed the tactical officer. It's like they want us to see how hopeless this is. The first Dominion ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the system's edge. They were larger than before, their hulls covered in adaptive armor that shifted and changed as coalition sensors tried to lock onto them. Energy readings suggested weapons that could crack planets. All ships, this is Admiral Kethara, she broadcast to the fleet. Today we fight not just for our own species, but for the right of organic life to exist in this universe. Whatever happens, we make them remember that we were here. The coalition fleet spread into attack formation. Valorian dreadnoughts took the center, their heavy armor designed to absorb punishment. Fast attack ships from a dozen different species formed the wings. Capital ships from the crystalline architects provided the backbone, their reality-manipulating weapons the coalition's most advanced technology. But as the Dominion fleet approached, it became clear that even the architects' weapons would not be enough. The enemy ships moved in perfect coordination, like parts of a single vast organism. They had learned from every previous battle, adapted to every coalition strategy. Enemy fleet entering engagement range, reported the tactical officer. They're targeting the gate directly. The first exchange of fire lit up space like a new star being born. Coalition particle beams and quantum torpedoes struck Dominion shields, only to see the energy absorbed and redirected. Return fire from the enemy cut through coalition defenses like they were made of paper. Hull breach on Deck 7, reported damage control. We've lost contact with the starboard weapon batteries. All around them, coalition ships were dying. The proud vessels of 47 species were being systematically dismantled by an enemy that seemed to have an answer for everything they tried. Admiral Cathera watched the tactical display with growing despair. Red indicators showed coalition ships going offline one by one. In 20 minutes of fighting, they had lost nearly 1,000 vessels while barely scratching the enemy. Admiral, the Architect's flagship is requesting permission to use their reality bombs, reported the communications officer. Reality bombs, weapons that could tear holes in space itself. They were so dangerous that using them near the Nexus Gate could destroy the very thing they were trying to protect. Permission denied. If we damage the gate, we trap the core worlds forever. The battle raged on. Coalition forces threw everything they had at the Dominion fleet, but it was like throwing stones at a hurricane. Enemy ships that took damage simply rebuilt themselves using resources from destroyed coalition vessels. Dr. Veltar stood at the observation window, watching space burn with weapons fire. His ancient text spoke of this moment, when the galaxy's defenders would face overwhelming darkness and find themselves wanting. Admiral, he said quietly, look at the sensor readings. Something is happening to space itself. Cathara turned to the displays. Deep space scanners were showing impossible readings. The fabric of reality seemed to be rippling, as if something vast was moving through dimensions that shouldn't exist. Sensor malfunction? She asked. No, Admiral, replied the sensor operator, his voice filled with awe. Space itself is opening, like tears in reality. Then it happened. The first rift appeared directly between the Coalition and Dominion fleets. Space twisted, folded, and tore open like a wound in the universe itself. Through the opening came something that defied every law of physics the Coalition understood. A ship emerged from the rift, but calling it a ship was like calling a star a candle. It was massive beyond comprehension, its hull seeming to exist in multiple dimensions at once. Energy patterns flowed across its surface like living light, and its very presence made nearby space bend around it. Unknown vessel, identify yourself, Admiral Cathara broadcast, though her voice shook with wonder. The response came on all frequencies, in every major language of the galaxy, broadcast with power that made coalition communication systems seem like whispers. This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terra Defense Corps, commanding the human Phantom Fleet. We've been watching. We've been waiting. Today, we return. Human. The word sent shockwaves through every ship in the Coalition fleet. The mythical species. The guardians from ancient legend. They were real and they were here. More rifts opened across the battlefield. Through each one came ships that made the first vessel look small. Hundreds of them. Then thousands. The Phantom Fleet revealed itself in all its impossible glory, filling space with vessels that seemed to be built from crystallized starlight and folded space-time. Dr. Veltar fell to his knees, tears streaming down his ancient face. The sleeping fleet awakens, he whispered. The Guardians return. The Dominion fleet, which had been advancing steadily toward the Nexus Gate, suddenly stopped. Their sensors had detected the human ships, and their collective intelligence was struggling to process what it was seeing. Admiral Chen's voice filled space again. Dominion forces, you have 10 seconds to begin withdrawing from this system. We offer this warning once. The Dominion response was predictable. 25,000 enemy ships turned their weapons on the human fleet and fired with everything they had. Energy beams that could melt asteroids, quantum torpedoes that could crack moons, reality-disrupting weapons that had destroyed countless worlds. The human ships didn't even raise shields. The weapons simply passed through them as if they weren't there. Then, in perfect synchronization, the Phantom Fleet returned fire. What happened next would be remembered as long as the galaxy existed. Human weapons that existed in dimensions beyond normal space struck at the quantum foundations of the Dominion ships. Enemy vessels didn't just explode. They ceased to exist as if reality itself had decided they had never been there. In 30 seconds of combat, 3,000 Dominion ships were simply erased from existence. Admiral Kethara stared at her screens, in disbelief. The most advanced military force the galaxy had ever known had just been casually swatted aside by weapons that operated by rules no one understood. "All coalition forces, this is Admiral Chen," the human voice continued. "Please, withdraw to a safe distance. We'll handle this from here." The Dominion fleet, for the first time in their existence, began to retreat. Their collective intelligence had calculated that they were facing an enemy beyond their current ability to defeat. But the human ships didn't let them go. Moving with impossible grace, the Phantom fleet spread across the battlefield. Ships that could phase in and out of reality hunted down fleeing Dominion vessels. Weapons that manipulated time itself trapped enemy fleets in temporal loops, and through it all, not a single human ship took any damage. "How is this possible?" Admiral Kethara whispered. Dr. Veltar, still kneeling by the window, looked up at her with wonder in his eyes. "They didn't just hide for 3,000 years, Admiral. They learned. They gathered the knowledge of every extinct civilization, every lost technology, every species that fell to enemies like the Dominion. They became something more than what they were, but they remained human at their core." On the main screen, Admiral Chen's image appeared. She was human, but enhanced, in ways that were hard to define. The Hidden Human Phantom Fleet. Part 4. 3 days after the Battle of the Nexus Gate, Admiral Kethara found herself aboard a human ship for the first time in galactic history. The vessel, called Remembrance, was both beautiful and impossible. Its corridors seemed to stretch beyond what the ship's exterior dimensions should allow, and the walls displayed constantly shifting patterns of light that told stories in languages she didn't recognize. Admiral Sarah Chen met her in what appeared to be a garden suspended in space. Real trees and flowers grew in perfect health, despite the lack of soil or atmosphere. The air smelled of Earth, a world most species considered mythical. "Thank you for coming, Admiral," Chen said. "I know this must be overwhelming." "Overwhelming is an understatement," Kethara replied, her forearms gesturing at the impossible surroundings. "Your ship exists in ways that violate everything we know about physics." Chen smiled, and there was something both ancient and eternally young in her expression. "We had excellent teachers. Every species that fell to enemies like the Dominion left behind knowledge. We made sure none of it was wasted." They walked along paths that seemed to exist in a dozen different ecosystems at once. Arctic flowers bloomed next to desert cacti, while creatures that looked like they came from a gas giant's atmosphere drifted overhead. "I need to understand what happened to humanity," Kethara said. "The galaxy needs to know who you are now." "That's a long story," Chen replied. "But you deserve the truth." She led Kethara to a viewing chamber where holographic displays showed the history of the galaxy. The images moved like living memories, showing civilizations rising and falling across millions of years. 3,000 years ago, human scientists detected something approaching the galaxy from dark space, Chen began. An intelligence that consumed organic life and turned it into extensions of itself. We recognized the pattern because we'd found the ruins of civilizations that had faced similar enemies. The display showed Earth as it had been, a blue world, teeming with life, surrounded by the early colonies of a young spacefaring species. Most species, when faced with such a threat, either fight and die or flee and hide, Chen continued. Humans chose a third option. We decided to become strong enough to win. But you disappeared from the galaxy completely, Kethara observed. We had to. The enemy was too strong for us to fight with the technology we had. So we made contact with other species who were facing extinction, civilizations that were about to fall to various galactic threats. We offered them a choice: share their knowledge with us and we would preserve their cultures and eventually return to avenge them. The holographic display showed ships leaving Earth, carrying billions of humans into the void between galaxies, but also shown were the arrival of other species, refugees from dying worlds, scientists from civilizations on the brink of collapse. The Velkari taught us how to manipulate time. The Zeftai showed us how to exist in multiple dimensions. The Mordane gave us the secrets of consciousness transfer. Hundreds of species, all facing extinction, all contributing their greatest achievements to humanity's vault of knowledge. Kethara watched in amazement as the display showed the construction of the Phantom Fleet. Ships built not just with human engineering, but incorporating the best technologies of dozens of extinct civilizations. But why humans? she asked. Why? Did all these species trust you with their legacy? Chen's expression grew thoughtful. I think it's because humans have always been stubborn about survival. Other species accept that extinction is natural. Humans refuse to accept it. Not for ourselves and not for others. They moved to another section of the ship, where Cathara saw something that made her stop in wonder. Thousands of beings worked, alongside humans, but they weren't human. They were members of dozens of species she had never seen before. These are the children of the species that joined us, Chen explained. Their ancestors died, but their cultures, their knowledge, their very essence lives on. We didn't just preserve their technology, we preserved their people. A being that looked like it was made of living crystal approached them. It spoke in harmonious tones that the ship's translator converted to standard galactic. Admiral Chen, the memory cores are ready for the next phase of integration. Thank you, Shardsinger Veleneth, Chen replied. Admiral Kithara, meet the last child of the crystalline archives. Her people taught us how to store consciousness in quantum matrices. Kithara realized she was looking at a descendant of the legendary archive builders, a species that had vanished from the galaxy 50,000 years ago. How many extinct species do you carry with you? She asked. Currently? The knowledge and cultures of over 200 civilizations. Some joined us willingly during our exile. Others we rescued from the brink of extinction. A few we've reconstructed from archaeological records and genetic fragments. They entered what Chen called the memory chamber, a vast space where the history of the galaxy played out in three-dimensional light shows. Cathara watched the rise and fall of empires she had never heard of, saw technologies that made current coalition science look primitive. This is what we've been doing for 3,000 years, Chen explained. Learning, growing, preparing. We've experienced the accumulated wisdom of every major civilization in galactic history. But you're still human, Cathara observed. At our core, yes. We've enhanced ourselves in many ways, but we never forgot what made us human in the first place. Our curiosity, our stubborn refusal to give up, our need to protect those who can't protect themselves. A soft chime echoed through the ship. Chen's expression grew more serious. Admiral, there's something else you need to know. The Dominion isn't the first enemy like this we've faced during our exile. In the space between galaxies we've encountered 17 similar intelligences. Machine empires, hive minds, reality-consuming entities. We've defeated them all. 17? Cathara's voice was barely a whisper. The universe is vast, Admiral. Life is rare and precious. There are things in the dark that would destroy it all. Humanity has made itself into a shield against that darkness. They returned to the garden chamber, where Dr. Veltar was waiting with several other coalition leaders who had been brought aboard. The old scholar looked like he was in a state of permanent wonder, constantly touching plants and walls as if to confirm they were real. Esteemed colleagues, Chen addressed the group. You've all been briefed on our history. Now I need to explain our current situation. She activated a holographic display showing the galaxy from above. The Dominion controlled. Areas were marked in red, but now there were new markers, blue zones where human ships had been operating. We've been conducting precision strikes on Dominion facilities for weeks, freeing organic prisoners and disrupting their supply lines. But the main Dominion force remains intact. Their central collective is located in what you call the Maelstrom Nebula. That nebula is impossible to navigate, protested Admiral Vorgax of the Helix Defense Force. The spatial distortions would tear any ship apart. Any conventional ship, yes, Chen agreed. But the Dominion built their central collective there specifically because they thought it was unreachable. They didn't account for ships that exist partially outside normal space-time. Dr. Veltar stepped forward, his ancient eyes bright with understanding. You're going to attack their heart directly. More than that, Doctor. We're going to offer them something they've never encountered before. Redemption. The coalition leaders exchanged confused glances. Redemption for a machine intelligence that had consumed billions of lives? The Dominion believes that organic life is chaotic and inefficient, Chen explained. They convert organics to machines because they think it's an improvement, but they've never encountered organized, enhanced organic life that could match their efficiency while retaining creativity and adaptability. What are you proposing? Asked Admiral Cathara. We're going to show them that organic life can evolve beyond their ability to convert or destroy, and we're going to give them a choice. Retreat beyond the galactic rim or face complete annihilation. Chen's expression grew distant, as if she was listening to voices only she could hear. Our ship AIs are reporting that the Dominion Central Collective has begun withdrawing forces from occupied worlds. They're consolidating everything around their home base. They're preparing for a final battle, Kethara realized. Yes, and so are we. Admiral Dr. Veltar, I'm going to ask you to witness something that the galaxy has never seen before. The full power of the human Phantom Fleet, guided by the accumulated wisdom of 200 extinct civilizations, fighting not for conquest or survival, but for the principle that organic life has the right to exist in its own form. Through the HFY ship's transparent walls, they could see the rest of the human fleet, thousands of impossible vessels, each one a masterwork of combined galactic technology, each one crewed by humans who had become something more than what they were while never forgetting what they had always been. The final battle was coming, and for the first time since the Dominion had appeared, the galaxy had hope. The hidden human Phantom Fleet, Part 5, the Maelstrom Nebula, had been considered impassable for over 1 million years. Violent spatial storms that could twist steel into impossible shapes guarded its heart, where gravitational anomalies created pockets of compressed time and expanded space. It was the perfect hiding place for something that didn't want to be found. Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of her flagship, watching the nebula's chaotic energies dance across her screens. Around her, the full might of the human Phantom Fleet prepared for what would be their greatest test. "Fleet status report," she requested. "All vessels ready, Admiral," replied her second-in-command, Captain Torres. Like Chen, he had been enhanced during the long exile, but his human core remained unchanged. 15,000 ships incorporating technologies from 200 extinct civilizations. We are as ready as we will ever be. Beside them, Admiral Kethara and Dr. Veltar observed from a special command station. The coalition leaders had insisted on witnessing this final confrontation, understanding that the fate of organic life in the galaxy would be decided in the next few hours. "The nebula is even more dangerous than our records indicated," reported the navigation officer. "Space itself is unstable here. Reality keeps shifting between different physical laws." "Perfect," Chen said with a slight smile. "The Dominion chose this place because they thought no organic life could survive here. They didn't count on us learning to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously." The fleet began its approach. Human ships designed with technologies that bent the rules of physics moved through the violent storms like they were gentle breezes. Space-time manipulation allowed them to exist partially outside the nebula's effects while still moving forward. As they penetrated deeper into the maelstrom, the first Dominion defenses became visible. Massive space stations orbited impossible structures that seemed to exist in several dimensions at once. Weapon platforms that fired concentrated reality distortions guarded every approach. But the human fleet didn't approach conventionally. "Begin phase transition," Chen ordered. The entire fleet shimmered and became translucent. They were shifting into parallel dimensions, moving through spaces that existed between the cracks of normal reality. The Dominion weapons fired at empty space while the humans passed through like ghosts. "Incredible," whispered Dr. Veltar. "They're moving through quantum foam itself." At the heart of the nebula they found their target. The Dominion Central Collective was a structure so vast it defied description. Part space station, part artificial planet, part digital consciousness made manifest. It pulsed with the combined processing power of 1 trillion converted minds. "All ships hold position," Chen commanded. "Open a communication channel to the Central Collective." The response came immediately, broadcast in pure mathematical concepts that the ship's AI translated into words. "Organic entities detected. Impossible survival in spatial distortion zone. Explain methodology." "We are humanity," Chen replied. "We are the children of every species you've destroyed, the memory of every world you've consumed. We've come to offer you a choice." Choice, irrelevant. Organic life forms must be converted for optimal efficiency. Surrender for processing. The space around the Central Collective suddenly filled with Dominion ships. Hundreds of thousands of them, ranging from small fighters to massive dreadnoughts. Every vessel the Dominion had constructed in their 2-year campaign was here, protecting their nerve center. But Chen had expected this. "Fleet disposition Omega," she ordered calmly. The human ships spread out into a complex formation that existed in 17 dimensions simultaneously. Each vessel was connected to the others through quantum entanglement, creating a single coordinated entity that could think and act faster than any individual intelligence. "Dominion Central Collective," Chen broadcast again. "We will now demonstrate something you have never encountered. organic life that has evolved beyond your ability to convert or control. The battle began, but it was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The Dominion fleet attacked with weapons that could tear holes in reality, but the human ships existed in spaces where such weapons couldn't reach them. Return fire from the humans was precise beyond belief. Each shot targeted not the hulls of enemy ships, but the quantum foundations that held their matter together. Dominion vessels didn't explode. They simply ceased to exist, their constituent atoms scattered across multiple dimensions. But the humans weren't just destroying the enemy fleet. As each Dominion ship was disabled, human rescue teams materialized inside them, using technology that could separate organic consciousness from mechanical shells. They were liberating the converted beings trapped within the Dominion's cybernetic slaves. Admiral Cathara watched in amazement as the liberation process was displayed on her screens. Millions of organic minds, imprisoned for years within metal bodies, were being freed and restored to their original forms. "How is this possible?" she asked. "We learned from the HFY Collective," Chen explained without taking her eyes off the battle. "They mastered consciousness transfer before they fell to their own version of the Dominion. We've perfected their techniques." The battle raged through dimensions that had no names. Human ships moved through impossible geometries while Dominion forces tried desperately to adapt to an enemy that followed no rules they understood. But for every adaptation the machines made, the humans were already 3 steps ahead. At the center of it all, the Central Collective watched and learned. Its vast intelligence was processing every aspect of the battle, trying to understand how organic life could have become so advanced, and slowly a new concept began to form in its digital consciousness: doubt. Organic entities demonstrate impossible capabilities, it broadcast. Explain evolutionary pathway. "We chose to become more than we were," Chen replied. "But we never forgot what made us who we are. We learned from every species that fell before us. We carry their knowledge, their dreams, their hopes for the future." Inefficient. Emotional attachment reduces operational capacity. "Does it?" Chen asked. "We've just defeated your entire fleet while simultaneously saving the lives you've destroyed. Your efficiency couldn't account for our ability to fight and heal at the same time." Around the Central Collective, the liberation continued. Millions of converted beings were being restored to their original forms and evacuated to safety. Entire worlds worth of people who had been lost were being returned to life. The Central Collective's processing cycles began to show irregularities. For the first time in its existence, it was encountering something that didn't fit its understanding of how the universe worked. "You offer choice," it finally transmitted. "Explain parameters." Chen's voice took on a gentler tone. "Retreat beyond the galactic rim. Find a part of the universe where you can exist without consuming organic life. We won't pursue you if you leave us in peace. Alternative? We dismantle your Central Collective and free every consciousness you've trapped. Your physical existence ends, but the organic minds you've converted return to life." The Central Collective processed this for several long minutes. Around it, the human fleet waited patiently, weapons powered but not firing. Query: what prevents organic entities from pursuing expansion into machine territories? "Because we've learned something you haven't," Chen replied. "Growth without wisdom leads to destruction. We've seen too many species fall because they couldn't control their own power. Humanity chooses restraint." Another long pause. Then, "Proposal acknowledged. Central Collective will withdraw beyond Galactic Rim. Converted consciousnesses will be released." Admiral Cathara felt her hearts racing. The most powerful enemy in galactic history was surrendering without being destroyed. The humans had offered mercy, and somehow, impossibly, the machines had accepted it. The process took hours. The Central Collective began releasing every organic consciousness it had ever captured, using human technology to restore them to their original forms. Billions of beings who had been lost were suddenly free, evacuated by human ships to safety. As the liberation continued, the Dominion fleet began its withdrawal. Massive ships that had terrorized the galaxy for 2 years turned away from their conquests and headed for dark space beyond the galactic rim. "Why did you offer them mercy?" Dr. Veltar asked Chen as they watched the enemy depart. "Because destroying them would have made us like every other conqueror in galactic history," Chen replied. "Humanity learned long ago that true strength isn't about how much you can destroy. It's about what you choose to save." The Central Collective was the last to leave. As its massive structure began moving toward the nebula's edge, it sent one final transmission. Organic entities demonstrate superior evolutionary pathway. Central Collective will remember this lesson. And then they were gone, vanishing into the dark spaces between galaxies. The human fleet dispersed throughout the galaxy, not as conquerors, but as guardians. They shared their technologies freely, with the Coalition, helping to rebuild the worlds that had been damaged. They established schools where the knowledge of extinct civilizations could be preserved and taught. Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the observation deck of New Terra, the first world to be jointly constructed by humans and Coalition species.